Hello and welcome to GreenFleet Talks. My name is Kate Armitage and I'm your ambassador for our discussion today. I'm delighted to be joined by a GreenFleet Talks regular, Steve Beadle, who's head of ozone and pricing at the Grosvenor Group. Hi Steve, great to see you again.
Yeah, likewise Kate, great to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to our discussion today. Steve, let's dive straight in with is the ICE ban deadline 2030, 2035, or is it going to go back to 2030 again? How much disruption is this whole speculation and the commitment from Labour having on business plans? What are your customers telling you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Personally, I think to start with, for cars, particularly company cars, it's achievable, as well as the majority of car manufacturers. The shift was already well underway. We've seen BEV products become on the market, extremely well established and are increasing all the time. And here at Grosvenor, we didn't really see any change in behaviour when the previous government put the date back. Most customers continue to order as they were, certainly for electric cars. So much so our car order take is over 80% now, plug-in capability. So, very strong. But I guess where I could see there be an issue is if Labour decides to change the deadline for vans as well. As the progress that we've seen with van fleets has been far slower. And I feel that any criticism of van operators around that is rather harsh, because certainly the ones we've spoken to are wanting to embrace the change, but they haven't had access to enough suitable product. So on the back of this, we decided to launch our electric switch program, which means customers can source or access an ICE van today through a slightly more flexible contract that allows them to switch that to an electric vehicle or electric van without penalty when a suitable one becomes available.
Thanks, Steve. I mean, I think we'll pick up on vans again a bit later on, but there's no doubt that vans are more challenging, and this switch product is a great way of acknowledging, look, the van you need might not be here today, but in 12 or 18 months' time, it could well be. So, just get a contract that allows you to, as you say, switch, which is great. And it is probably worth saying, at the time that we're recording this, Steve, you're exactly right. DfT have pretty much said, yes, Labour is planning to bring the car ban forward again to 2030, but they have not made a comment on vans yet. So
it needs clarifying. Yeah,
it does need clarifying, and hopefully they will listen to the market and heed your advice, Steve. So we regularly talk about this, but I'm always conscious of the fact that there are businesses out there that have not begun the switch to electric, particularly some SMEs. So what advice have you got for those businesses, and what are the main points that they need to consider? And is now the time for them, I guess, is the key question here.
Absolutely. Don't delay. So if not already, we're big advocates of whole life cost modelling. So it's very easy to become put off by the initial upfront cost of electric vehicles, whereas a whole life cost approach will give you a much more balanced view of how electric vehicles can save you money in other areas. It's also important to be very clear on how your current vehicles are being used, what locations, mileages, is there a facility for the driver to charge at home. And we try and talk about a 5-stage plan often, which consists of, the first being around communication. So being clear on the message that you're putting out there, beyond the company's rationale. The second being research, so survey drivers to give them a voice for concerns, but as well as positive suggestions. And the third being planning. So on the back of the driver feedback, utilize that and any vehicle data you have to build a plan. And then the fourth being test the plan, with the fifth then being kind of launch. But those steps become a continuous process of review and refinement. But then, we are conscious. It's easy for me to say in front of you, Kate. Say those things. It's not always as easy to put these things in practice. So we, on the back of this, we're seeing our evaluate solution work really well, where we're essentially offering used electric vehicles over flexible lease periods with minimal commitment, allowing a try before you buy opportunity for customers.
I love that product, Steve. I love it. And of course, because it is a used vehicle, it's not the premium, it's not premium priced. So you're much more likely to get that TCO. And as we know, the batteries on these vehicles are holding up so well that you may as well be getting a new vehicle.
Absolutely, yeah, it's incredible. All the previous concerns have disappeared.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Steve, stick with me on this. You mentioned earlier on that 80% of your order book for cars is now electric, which is fantastic news. So with cars, we used to talk about the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
But actually, 80% is not the low-hanging fruit anymore. No. If anything, it's that stubborn 20%, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It is, but that number's reducing, year on year or month on month. So it's happening and at great pace.
Yeah. Okay, so but let's flip that on its head when we talk about vans, because we are still to a large extent in that low-hanging fruit space for vans. So why is that the case? What are the barriers, and what would you like to see happening in the van market?
Yeah, I guess one of the reality is that with commercial fleets, there's not a one solution fits all, which makes it much more challenging than cars. As a lease company, it's something we're really embracing and want to understand. So we recently hosted a roundtable event with a good mix of van operators, allowing an open forum really to allow them to discuss the challenges, share experiences, as well as share positive advice on how to overcome some of these challenges. And I think one of the overriding viewpoints was that the change needs to be driven from the top at board level. And rather than trying to fit electric vans into a current existing operating model, it's more of a case of understanding how the business can adapt and understanding capabilities of electric vans on the market, which can allow you to develop comparisons of which may be most suitable, but also trialing vans. That's essential to this really, which will allow you to see whether a blend of manufacturers, a blend of vehicles with different capabilities will be required. I guess then from there, it's all about the charging infrastructure. So begin to map that out to understand whether home charging is an option, and if it's not, whether the focus is more on public and workplace charging.
Yeah, lots of considerations, Steve. And I think, certainly that buying from the top is so important.
Yeah.
And, if I've understood you correctly, you're really saying that there may need to be some more operational change. There will be low-hanging fruit where you can literally say, let's take that van off the road because it's low range, it's low mileage, and it has a very low payload. But there aren't that many vans out there that do that, that meet that criteria. So maybe you have to look at your operation and where and how you can fit these vehicles in. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. But as you say, there will be low-hanging fruits and quick wins, which will kickstart, the change, the transition, and it'll be a bit like a light in the fuse. It'll catch.
Yeah. And of course, with more choice and with better range and better payload, it's only going to gain traction, I'm sure of it. You mentioned in your 5-point plan for businesses that are getting started, your point number 2 was engage with the drivers, which is great, because we would say that drivers are arguably the most important piece of the electrification puzzle, getting these drivers on board and making sure that they're confident behind the wheel is super important. So what other tips have you got for engaging with drivers?
Yeah, as you say, driver engagement is key. But it's also understanding the suitability for them, not only for work, but a lot of these vehicles, are used personally too. So, as coming back to that survey, that's a brilliant way to access or understand all of that data, which will allow, sort of informed decisions to be made from there. And, we're not forgetting that, and we remind companies of this, it's about a transition over a period, not necessarily converting the entire fleet to electric in one go. So I guess coming back to your low-hanging fruit scenario initially, and that survey will not only drive engagement, but it'll give them a platform to raise their concerns, and also highlight those who are really keen and have an appetite to get into a electric vehicle, putting their hands up for taking one right now. But the other part to it is, people don't like change, so your drivers will need reassuring. This is where we've held sessions and webinars with driver audiences where we can myth bust, reassure them that we have a nationwide accessible service network in place for electric vehicles, as well as specialist provisions for things like accident management, breakdown services, support with charging concerns, and all those elements. Excuse me, but there is a slightly pragmatic approach where there will be a number of drivers who may not yet be ready, but there certainly are large numbers of drivers who are. So it's really important to support those in making the right decision.
Yeah, I agree, Steve, and much easier to attract the drivers with a carrot rather than with a stick, I think.
Indeed, yes, yeah.
And usually an electric car is a pretty nice carrot, in my experience.
Pleasure to drive. It's we briefly touched on the ranges that you can get from vehicles now is incredible. The infrastructure's growing at such a pace. It is a pleasure.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you and I, we're both seeing a range on a single charge of about 300 miles. So you'd be very unlucky if you needed to get more than one rapid charge during a working day, I think, on that kind of basis.
Yeah, and the technology in cars, the drive you to the charge points. It's the Tesla network is opening up for the manufacturers. Yeah. It's never been better. So
yeah, great, good. Completely agree with you, Steve. As always, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for your insight today.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, and of course, thank you to Grosvenor Leasing for joining GreenFleet Talks, and thank you for watching. Please tune into GF365 again soon.